All right. We're going to spend a little bit more time today with the factoring trinomials. I'd get some of you, a couple of you that were gone, get you kind of caught up. And some of you that weren't all that attentive yesterday, getting you back on track so you know where we're going. And then just giving some of you that have done what you're supposed to do and been here kind of reassurance that you're going in the right direction. So we're going to factor trinomials today, again, where our a value is 1. So what we're talking about is something if we have like a squared minus 4a, nose itches, minus 12, where we're going to factor this into 2 binomials. So remember when we started this out, to make this 2 binomials, the first thing that we looked at when we did this is we looked at our variable. In this case, it's a. So that meant that we went ahead and put our first values both as a, because if we're going to FOIL it out, a times a is a squared. The next thing we did was we created this X method to do this. And we said the top was our a value, which kind of a bad variable to pick a, but I did it anyway. I'm sorry, that's a times c on the top, and then b on the bottom. And remembering that our a value, b value, and c value come from our equation when it's in standard form. So the a value is out in front of the base that's being squared. The b value is out in front of the base of a, of the b, x or whatever. And then the c value is your constant. So in this case, our a value is 1, and that's going to be the case for all of them today. That'll change tomorrow. But in this case, our a value is 1, and our c value is negative 12. So we're going to take 1 times negative 12, and that's going to be the number that we put on top of the x. The b value in this case is negative 4. So we're going to put a negative 4 on the bottom. The next thing we talked about then is we talked about, okay, if I have a negative on the top and a negative on the bottom, what did that mean for the middle terms? Well, if it's negative on top, that means that one of these terms is going to be negative and one of these terms is going to be positive. Because our end result is whatever we put here and here. We want to multiply them together to get negative 12. And we want to add them together to get negative 4. Well, where do those numbers come from? Those numbers come from taking 12 and looking at the different factors of 12. So in other words, what 2 numbers when multiplied together are 12? And you could go and list them. 1 times 12 is 12. 2 times 6 is 12. And 4 times 3 is 12. Okay? So we've got those different factors, 12. Now we need to figure out which 2 we need to use. We know they multiply to be 12. It's going to be negative 12, so one of them is going to be negative and one's going to be positive. But then when we add them together, they got to be negative 4. So it's obviously going to be 6 and 2. Now we need to determine which one's going to be negative and which one's going to be positive. Because our end result is negative, right? Because our end result is negative, the bigger of the 2 numbers between 6 and 2 has to be your negative one. So this is going to be negative 6 and positive 2. So then when we rewrite it, we simply go minus 6 here and plus 2 here. And you're done. And this is kind of the nice way to do it. Could we do this by grouping? You could do this by grouping, and it's interesting, and this is kind of the shortcut method, but tomorrow we're going to talk about this grouping. So we're going to kind of look at this same question again, I'm going to show you how you can kind of do this by grouping instead. And really, in this case, you probably wouldn't do it. You'd probably just use the x method because that leading coefficient is 1. But if the leading coefficient isn't 1, we're going to group this a little bit. But you still start out the same way we did. That was negative 12 and negative 4. So negative 6 and, what do we say, it was positive 2. What we can do with this, if we want to do this by grouping, this is kind of called splitting that middle term, is I could rewrite this as a squared minus 6a plus 2a minus 12. So what I've essentially done is I've taken those two middle terms and I've kind of split them in the middle here. Negative 6a plus 2a, that's still negative 4a. That hasn't changed. I haven't changed its value. Now we look at it, and we can factor this now by grouping. As we talked about, if you have 4 terms, you can factor it by grouping. So we could go ahead now and group these first two together and take out a GCF. GCF for there is a, and that would leave me with a minus 6. And then I could take a GCF out of this second part, which is 2, and then that leaves me with a minus 6 as well, and you get a minus 6 and a plus 2. Okay. That's kind of called splitting your middle term. Now, exactly why you would want to do that, if the leading coefficient is 1, you wouldn't, because your answer is right there. Tomorrow that's going to change a little bit because your answer is not exactly going to be there. But when the leading coefficient is 1, we can use that. Tomorrow we're going to have to take it a step further and use this kind of grouping thing. I just wanted to kind of give you a quick introduction of what kind of that splitting the middle means and how we're going to bring this around back into when we're factoring trinomials when that leading coefficient isn't 1. Let's look at another one. Let's go x squared. Let's go x squared plus 4x minus 21. Okay, so first step, we're going to break it into two binomials. Variable is x, so we're going to go x and x. We use the x method. What number goes on top? Negative 21 goes on top. On the bottom? 4. So we've got a negative and a positive. So if we have a negative on the top, that still means we're going to have a negative on one of them, and one of them has to be positive. Because again, the middles have to multiply to be the top, add together to be the bottom. So our different factors are 21. 1 and 21, 3 and 7. They have to have a difference of 4. 7 and 3. Which one's positive, the 7 or the 3? The 7 is going to be positive. The 3 is going to be negative. Because the leading coefficient was 1, we aren't going to worry about splitting the middle. That's your solution. And you're done. There's nothing left to do with it. You can check these anytime you want by using FOIL. X times x is x squared. X times 7 is 7x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times 7 is negative 21. Combine your like terms. X squared plus 4x minus 21. That's what we started out with. That must mean that's right. So realistic world, there's never any reason you should get a factoring one wrong because you can always check to see if you have it correct by using the FOIL method to do that. Okay. I'm going to have you try a couple of them, and then we'll go over them, and we'll move on for the day. So go k squared minus 2k minus 80, which is a big one. So I want you to do that one. Then I also want you to do r squared minus 4r minus 60. Go ahead and factor those two. This is the one that you've been waiting for. All right, here we go. So the first one, negative 80 on top, negative 2 on the, positive 2 on the bottom, negative 2 on the bottom, I'm sorry. So this is where being able to find factors can save you a lot of time if you're pretty good at doing the kind of the small stuff in your head. If you're not, I mean, and you had to list the 1 and the 80, the 2 and the 40, if you had to list all of those, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, the bottom is 2, so you're looking for something, it's negative 2. Because it's negative 2, that means you're looking for a difference of 2. That's where the 8 and the 10 come out. So if I put plus 10, minus 10, if you put minus 10 plus 8, it's the same thing. So k minus 10, k plus 8 is the same thing as k plus 8, k minus 10. Either way, it's your solution. Questions with that one? Second one, negative 60 on top, negative 4 on the bottom. And again, I listed a few more this time. 2 and 30, that has a difference. It's negative, so it's got to be a difference. That's a difference of 28. That's a different. 4 and 15 is a difference of 11. 6 and 10 is a difference of 4. That's what I wanted. It has to be negative 4, so the 10 has to be negative. 6 be positive. So again, remember the middle terms. Negative 10 times 6 is the top value, negative 60. Negative 10 plus 6 is negative 4. That bottom value has to be what it is. So you get r minus 10 and r plus 6. Again, if you turn it around, r plus 6, r minus 10, same exact thing. Just a different way to write it. Do you have to check them to make sure they're correct? No, not going to require you to do that. Just know that if you're the type of person that needs to know if you're right or wrong, you can certainly do that, other than looking at the bottom of the page where the answers usually are. But not today, because they're not there today. Factoring trinomials. A is equal to 1. Any questions with this? Going once, going twice. Sold.